Joining us now is Democratic Senator Chris Murphy, a member of the Foreign Affairs Committee and one of the 26 senators who signed this new letter. And, Senator, we're also told now that Israel, Qatar, and the U.S. are in talks for a 3-day humanitarian pause so that maybe hostages could come out and humanitarian aid and others could come out as well, and aid could get in. I just talked to Naftali Bennett, a former prime minister who does not speak for Netanyahu, who said no way on that 3-day pause. But what are your concerns about the way Israel is processing the war as they have intensive airstrikes and are really in the heart of Gaza City?
So, listen, first of all, I'm open to the exact time frame for this humanitarian pause, but it does strike me that it's necessary if our priority is getting the hostages out. And when I talk to my constituents in Connecticut, when I talk to the families of hostages in the Northeast, they want us to prioritize getting those hostages back to their families. We also need some time to be able to set up lines of relief when that bombing is constant and much of it is near food distribution centers, bakeries, and hospitals. It's hard to be able to do the humanitarian work we need to do. Listen, I've been pretty clear about my position. I do not support a ceasefire. I do not believe that Israel should stand down in their fight to hold Hamas accountable. I think that would just give Hamas more time to rearm and attack Israel again. But I do believe that the size of the civilian casualties have been too high. And ultimately, I think that that will frustrate Israel's war plan, which is to defeat Hamas. We've seen this in Afghanistan. When we were too casual about civilian casualties, that ended up growing the strength, the power, and the recruitment efforts of the Taliban. And I worry that the same thing will happen inside of Israel. So to me, both from a moral perspective and a strategic perspective, the number of civilian casualties has to come down. And it's important for us to get the hostages out, humanitarian aid in, which is why it is also important to have some sensibly timed pause.
At the same time, polling shows that support in America for money for Ukraine is really dropping, that support has gone, down almost in half in the last couple of months as the war continues. And at least one general who was disputed by Zelensky on Meet the Press on Sunday, but one leading general said that they're at stalemate. Do you think you can save the Ukraine aid, which is not going to be in the House package, but the idea is that the Senate will put it back in and time will run out and the House will go along with it? But with this new speaker, how do you know?
Well, I don't think we have any choice here but to pass Ukraine aid. And I listened to some of my Republican colleagues who claim to be China hawks attempting to bury Ukraine under a Russian assault. Let's be clear. President Xi's watching what's happening in Ukraine right now, and he will expedite the time frame for his assault on Taiwan if he sees the United States and the West give up on Ukraine. And so if you care about China, you have to care about Ukraine. We are trying to find a path forward in the Senate. Unfortunately, Senate Republicans have said in order to pass Ukraine aid, they need some changes in border policy. I'm very willing to talk to them about those changes. We can't get a comprehensive immigration reform bill done, but maybe we can make enough changes that will allow Republicans and Democrats in the Senate to come together around Ukraine aid, and that bipartisan achievement will put pressure on the House to do the same.
And on a lightly note, well, we're looking forward to a Xi summit with President Biden at the APEC meeting in San Francisco. But we're losing the 3 giant pandas after 50-some years. Not those 3, but their descendants and progeny. What about losing the pandas, which are such an important part of life in Washington? Birth to death. It
is a treat for visitors to Washington to experience that at the National Zoo. But we probably have bigger fish to fry, bigger priorities with China. And listen, they are an adversary. They are trying to control the global supply chains so that they can run the rules of the global economy. We have got to have a dialogue with China so that we don't get into a military confrontation unknowingly or by accident. But we do have to treat them as the adversary they are. But even adversaries over the course of the last 100 years found a way to talk. I'm not sure that Biden and Xi will settle the panda question, but maybe over the course of the last 100 years, really important issues that stand between these two very important nations.
Like reestablishing military-to-military communications. I know we're out of time.
Really important. Yeah, really
critically.
important. We just can't get into a fight by accident, and that military to military communication is absolutely critical.